Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to another weekly wrap-up wherein I tell you about the books that I read in the past week. I read 5 things, let's get straight into them. First, I went on a Guin binge and I read her 3 earliest Hainish novels, which are in this bind-up called Worlds of Exile and Illusion. The books are Rocannon's World, Planet of Exile, and City of Illusions, and I think that the quality of the books goes up very rapidly in that order. I had put off reading these books for years. People don't usually talk about them. Other Hainish novels like The Dispossessed and The Left Hand of Darkness get a lot more discussion and stuff, and I think rightly so. These were all okay, but not ones that I think I will reread repeatedly like The Left Hand of Darkness. So I'm not going to really go into what these are about. I just want to talk about what I thought about them. Rocannon's World was a little bit boring. I didn't think it was really that great. It's her first novel ever, I think, and it's very much a traditional fantasy quest, but wrapped in some science fiction trappings. The story beats were very predictable, very traditional, and I was not really into it. The best part of Rocannon's World, though, was the first chapter, which was originally published as a short story called Assembly's Necklace, I believe, and I'd read that before just as a standalone story. I think it's included in her Unreal and the Real collection, and that as just a standalone story is good and very enjoyable. The rest of the book, though, is basically kind of boring. Then there's Planet of Exile, which I enjoyed much more, though I think this one is very obviously pre-Le Guin's feminist awakening in the way that she talks about and treats the female characters in the background. The main character is a woman, but I think it's very telling how other women just very offhandedly are talked about and mentioned and how they behave and stuff, and that was a little weird to me. I expect Le Guin to just be that amazing feminist sci-fi writer all the time, and the fact is she has a before and after period where feminism is concerned. So I like this one a lot more. The world building in this reminded me immediately of Game of Thrones. Basically, Le Guin came up with the winter is coming idea way before George R.R. Martin did, apparently. This planet that it's set on has seasons that last tens of years, like an entire lifetime, so you can be born in spring and never see summer, for example. So the fact that it's set right when winter is coming, for example, it gave me Game of Thrones vibes, probably because that idea is so ingrained in popular culture now. The thing that kind of jarred me about this particular book is that war, conflict, battle, like open siege, guerrilla warfare in the streets is right there on the page. And I associate Le Guin with stories that are not about epic battles. Like, she doesn't usually write so directly about warfare and battles and such, but in this book she does. And it's not like she never talks about conflict. She is always writing about conflict, I think, but usually the actual war happens somewhere else and she's writing about the consequences and the trickle-down effect and what happens to people on the margins and everything. So this was just different, but quite enjoyable. And then the last book, City of Illusions, was my favorite and the one that felt so much like a Le Guin story, with the characters, the setting, the plot. It's very much one man's inner journey to self-discovery and identity and what is truth, basically. And it also felt more like a Hainish novel to me. I'm not really sure what it means to be a Hainish novel, but I associate City of Illusions a lot more with the other stories like Left Hand of Darkness for some reason. But mainly, this collection of the earliest Hainish novels, it was okay. I would say that if you want to read Le Guin, if you want to read her Hainish cycle, don't start with these, start with The Left Hand of Darkness. If you ask me what you should read to begin with Le Guin, my answer is always going to be The Left Hand of Darkness because it's like my favorite book by her. So that's that. The last two things that I read this week, The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. I'm not going to talk about this here because I will do a separate review of it. It comes out on Tuesday. I probably won't have a review out on the day it comes out, but hopefully sometime this coming week I will have time to finish my review notes and actually film it. I loved this book so much. If you loved Hidden Figures, the movie and or the book, and you want more, if you want a story that includes more women, more people of color, more international approach to the birth of the space age in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and stuff, then this is an alternate history take on that you need to read. I adored this so much, and I need the second book. I need the conclusion to the duology. It was that good. And lastly, I finished If on a Winter's Night a Traveler by Italo Calvino. I finished this book late last night and it hasn't had much time to percolate in my brain. I'm not sure that I will have much to say about this one. I enjoyed it to about the halfway mark, and then I felt like I was losing patience with it. I was a little bit bored, and I started to be frustrated by the constant interruptions. So basically, this is about a reader. It's addressed to you, the reader, who picks up Italo Calvino's latest novel, begins reading it, and then the book is interrupted by the beginning of another book and another book, and the reader becomes a character who is searching for the actual book, and every time the reader thinks they found the book that they've been reading, it turns out to be the beginning of something else. And there's kind of this little investigation into who is doing this, involving a translator who, I don't know, is really into literary fakes and mistranslations or something. I'm not sure I followed the thread of the story throughout this entire thing, and probably because I started to lose patience with it. So the way that it's written, addressing the reader directly, was really fascinating for the first half. The bits about reading, the relationship between the reader and the author, and the writing process and all of that, it was really interesting and so true, especially the opening chapter. But by the end, I felt like it started to get a little bit too intellectual about reading, a little bit too pretentious, in fact. And when I closed the book, what I was really thinking is, I love reading, but I don't want to overthink reading as much as the characters in this book probably do. So I'm glad I read it, because I've been curious about If on a Winter's Night a Traveler for years. Now I know what it is, but I'm not really in love with it. I'll continue trying to read other things by Calvino, but at this point, the thing that I really love by Calvino is his cosmic comics. I've read Invisible Cities and I thought it was okay. That one I think really deserves a reread, and If on a Winter's Night is kind of so-so for me, but there you go. So that is it for me this week. Do let me know if you've read any of these books, and if you want to discuss them, leave me a comment down below. And I'll be back to talk to you again very soon in the next couple of days. And until then, bye.